I'm Rhonda Stapley, and I'm a survivor of serial killer Ted Bundy. I'm not the only survivor. There are at least 5 other women who have survived an encounter with him, but I might be the only one who can tell you what it was like to be alone in an isolated location with Ted Bundy when he changed from charming and charismatic to a murderous monster. I've been asked to answer a few questions about my experience for you. First, let me tell you a little bit about who I was before this happened. I was a upper middle class pharmacy student. I was attending college at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. I lived in an on-campus housing, an apartment with 3 other roommates and a cat. I was religious, very conservative, and naive. I didn't smoke or drink alcohol. I've never been in a bar or at a party or anywhere where alcohol was served. I didn't have friends who smoked or drank alcohol. I didn't even know any people that smoked. The people around me were always honest and hardworking, helpful and kind, and I had never experienced violence in any form, and I certainly did not expect to. First question is, could you tell about your encounter that day in 1974 with Ted Bundy? Let me tell you, first of all, I have written a book about that encounter, and you can learn a lot more from this book, much more detail about what happened than I'll be able to tell you now. But this is available on Amazon, or you can email me and I can arrange to get a copy for you. This happened on October 11th, 1974. I had a pair of brand new hiking boots. These were over the ankle, high top hiking boots, like waffle stompers. They had shoelaces that just were way too long for what was needed. And I ended up wrapping those shoelaces around and around the top of the boot about 3 times and then tying them and double knotting them. The point being that these shoes were on really well, and that will be important later on in my escape. I had taken a city bus downtown. This was a Friday afternoon. I had taken the bus downtown because I had a dental appointment. And after the dental appointment was over, what I had done was some dental surgery. I had stitches, a suture line all across my gum line on the inside. So my mouth was going to be very sore after it got unnumb. When the appointment was over, I decided to walk to a local park and kind of break the new shoes in. And so I did that. I walked over to Liberty Park. I walked around for a while, and after so much time, I decided that my face was starting to become unnumb, and maybe I better find a bus and get back up to campus and back up to my apartment. So I went to a bus stop, and while I was waiting there, this tan Volkswagen drove by. Drove by really slow, kind of passed me up, and then it stopped and backed up to where I was. And the driver leaned over and rolled down the passenger window and asked me where I was going. I told him I was going up to the university, and he said, "Me too, hop in." I told him I was a pharmacy student. He told me he was a law student. This was 1974 in Salt Lake City. I knew better than to hitchhike. Everyone knew better than to hitchhike, and this didn't feel like hitchhiking. This felt like a friendly college student helping another college student. It didn't feel scary, and I wasn't alarmed in any way, and it didn't feel wrong. After I got in the car, in just a couple of blocks, he turned a direction that wasn't the normal route to go. And instead of taking me to campus, he drove me up a nearby canyon. Actually, we drove up a couple of canyons, but the first part of the trip was pleasant, and he was polite and nice. And when I asked him why we were not going directly to campus, he reassured me. He said, "You know, I hope you don't mind, but I have a really short errand to run up by the zoo. And I didn't mind. I was with a handsome, somewhat handsome looking, bright, blue-eyed law student. I thought it was my lucky day. I was making a new friend. So we drove up the zoo canyon, and we didn't stop at the zoo, of course. There was obviously no errand to run. But when we came out of that canyon, we should have turned to the right to go back to campus, and instead he turned left and started going up another canyon. Up until that point, he'd been talking to me just the way two people that don't know each other very well talk to each other, talking about the weather and talking about campus and talking about the new bookstore, talking about what we liked and what we didn't like, and music groups and things like that. But when we started up that second canyon, the ride changed. I still wasn't frightened. I'm still thinking he's just taking me for a ride, but I'm starting to get nervous, more of a shy nervousness. I'm thinking that he's driving up this canyon to find a place to pull over and park and make out. And I'm not a make-out girl. And what I want to do is just go home. My mouth is starting to hurt by now, and I don't want to make out, but I also don't want to have him think I'm a prude or embarrass either of us in either way. So I just wanted to figure out how to get out of this situation the best way that I could. And before long, he found a isolated picnic area and drove the Volkswagen into that area and parked it back in the trees. And then he turned in his seat so he was almost facing me and leaned in really close. Of course, I thought he's going to try to kiss me, and my mind is going, how can I get out of this, and gracefully. Instead, he very quietly, very softly said, "Do you know what? I'm going to kill you." And his hands went to my throat, and he started choking, shaking me and squeezing my throat. There was a battle in the car, and then I went unconscious, and when I came to, I was out of the car, laying on a picnic table. And as soon as I was conscious again, he jerked me off the picnic table and was slugging me in the stomach. So I was curled up on the floor in the canyon, crying and begging for my life and asking him not to hurt me anymore. And he looked scarier and angrier than anybody I've ever seen. His eyes were no longer blue, they were black. Pupils, almost like he had totally, all his whole eyes were pupils, and they seemed to be sunken in and just vacant. There was no soul there. And he was angry, his fists were clenched, and he had veins bulging on his forehead and his neck, and his face was bright red, and he is screaming at me. And he said, very much louder than I'm going to say, but he said, "You don't have the right to whine and cry at me. You should be thanking me. You should be grateful that you're even still alive. I can kill you anytime I want. You should be thanking me that you're even still breathing air. Are you grateful?" And I nodded. He says, Are you grateful?" Yeah, I'm grateful." "How grateful? How grateful are you? Are you this grateful?" And he unzipped his pants. After that incident, he shoved me over on the ground and was sitting on my stomach and my chest, just smashing me, all of his weight, so that it was hard to breathe. And I was struggling, telling him, "Get off, I can't breathe." And he said, "If you stop struggling, I'll give you air." And so I would stop struggling, and he would lift himself up on his knees a little bit and give me room to breathe. And then he would sit hard on me again, and I'd struggle again and say, "I can't breathe. Get off, I can't breathe." And he would tell me again, if you just stop struggling, I'll let you breathe. And then he put his hand over my nose and mouth and cut off my air that way. And he would do that until I would almost pass out. And then when I would regain consciousness, he would do it again, just repeating it over and over, and just kind of watching me fade in and out of life and watching me die. And after he toyed with me that way a while, he says, "How was that for you?" After I'd regained consciousness again, he said, "How was that for you? Did you like that? Do you like it better when I do like this?" And he sat on me really hard again so that I couldn't breathe. "Or do you like it better when I do this?" And he put his hand on my nose and mouth. "Or is it better for you when I do this?" And he put his hands on my throat and choked me unconscious again. And that time when I came to, I was back on the picnic table. And then he pulled me to the end of the table by my boots and raped me. And at the end of that, he choked me unconscious again. And this time when I came to, I was laying on the floor of the canyon. It's very, very dark now in the middle of the night, and he has moved away from me probably about 30 feet, and he's standing by the open door of the Volkswagen. The passenger door is open, and he's reaching in there doing something in the back of that little car. I didn't have an escape plan or anything magical or marvelous. I just instinctively knew I had to get out of there, so I jumped and ran. And because I had these wonderful boots on, he hadn't been able to get my pants off. And so when I ran, my pants were in the water around my ankles, and I tripped and fell. And fortunately, I landed in an ice-cold mountain stream, which wasn't very deep, but was really, really fast, and that swept me away from Ted Bundy and is what most likely saved my life. The miraculous thing was this was probably the only spot in that entire canyon where things could have come together in such a way, with the river and the parking lot and the speed of the water and things that would work exactly to for my benefit and to save my life. So then I was in the river, being swept away. This wasn't really deep, like I said, but it was fast, and there were boulders in the road, and I was being swept over, not little waterfalls, but little places where the water was swirling over top of the boulders in the middle of the creek, and being smashed into rocks and tree limbs and bushes. And finally, I came to it's like a grid that stops debris from going downstream, and there was a bunch of, tangled mess of tree limbs and branches and things there, and I was able to climb out. And then because I had these wonderful boots on, that meant I still had my pants on and most of my clothing, and I could just rearrange things, and I'd be ready to walk home. The first thing that I thought when I got out of that water, most people think that I should call 911 or something, but that wasn't even in my thought pattern. What I wanted to do, and what I told myself, my very, very first thought when I got out of the water and decided I'm not actually going to die, was no one can ever know that I did this stupid thing. I almost got myself killed. I knew better than to take a ride with a stranger. I thought people would judge me. I thought if my mother found out, she'd make me drop out of school and go home. I thought that my friends would look at me differently and treat me differently. I thought that people that didn't know me would point at me and say, "That's her, that's that girl that was raped." And I didn't know how I would handle that. I thought if I went to the police, they would ask me questions that I didn't even have the vocabulary at that point in my life to explain what had happened to me. And I decided that the very best thing for me to do was just to suck it up, pretend it never happened, and go on with my life. And that's what I tried to do for the next several years. Question number 2. See if I can find it here. Sorry. is when you fled from the hands of Bundy, did you feel afraid of being caught again? I did, but one of the things that had happened was my self-esteem had been destroyed. My religious upbringing had, that some of the teachings were that the most important thing that a young woman can have is her purity and her chastity. And if it comes to a choice of giving up your chastity or your life, you would be eternally better off if you gave up your life and saved your virtue. So I had these feelings of being filthy and unworthy and never be worthy of marrying a nice religious man from my religious group, and I was afraid that people would judge me, and just so many reasons I decided that I needed to not tell anybody what had happened. As far as Ted Bundy goes, yes, I was afraid he would find me. I had with me at that time, that probably was left in the Volkswagen, my backpack that had my driver's license and my school ID. Fortunately, they had old addresses. I had moved since I'd had the licenses and IDs printed. But he could have probably found me if he had really wanted to. But at that point, I think if I had run into him, I probably would have killed him, and I would have been the one going to jail. Or if he had found me and killed me, it didn't seem, I didn't think that it mattered, because my life didn't seem important anymore. I didn't seem important anymore. I was afraid that he would find me, but not as so afraid that I stayed home. After this incident was over, of course I walked all the way back to campus. It was probably close to 15 miles. My roommates were gone for the weekend, thankfully, and I was able to shower, and then I just wanted to sleep. So I slept all the rest of, it was early Saturday morning when I got home. I slept all of Saturday morning and most of Sunday, and then I had to clean things up, get rid of my river-ravaged clothes that were still on the bathroom floor and stuff, and so I put them in a bag to throw away because I didn't want them anymore. The only thing that I kept were my boots that had saved my life. Question number 3 says, from your point of view, what was Bundy's personality and actions like from the beginning to the end of your meeting with him? When I met him, he seemed charming and charismatic. He seemed well-mannered and well-educated. When he talked, his sentences were on target and on subject, and he sounded like he knew what he was talking about. He didn't seem nervous or upset. I've heard that he usually was inebriated and had some alcohol before an encounter, but I didn't smell alcohol. He just seemed nice and friendly and a little bit maybe shy. I was having to do a lot of the conversation. And then when we started going up the second canyon, and is when he kind of changed, and he stopped talking to me. His hands were just on the steering wheel or just driving and not answering my questions or contributing to our conversation in any way. When we got to the car, I still wasn't frightened. I just was uncomfortable when we got to the parking place when you park the car, until he said he was going to kill me and put his hands around my throat. And then I noticed his eyes had just changed to black, and he was no longer nice or polite in any way whatsoever. The next question has to do with PTSD. My PTSD experience is twofold. There were things that happened right after the assault, and then I managed to put it all away, not really deal with it, just put it away, and go on with my life for like 37 more years. And then I had PTSD again, really bad, which led me to writing the book and seeking real healing from that experience. So immediately right afterwards, I had a lot of anxious energy, and I just felt like running. In the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep, and I just wanted to go outside and run. And of course, by shortly thereafter, people were talking about girls missing, and some bodies were being found in canyons, and nobody was going anywhere by themselves. And my roommates were telling me it's dangerous to go outside. You can't go out there by yourself. And I told them, I don't care. I'm going. I gotta go run. And they would insist on coming with me. Especially this one roommate would say, "Okay, but you wait. I'm going to get my clothes on. I'm going to come with you. You're going to get killed. I'll get killed with you." Of course, we never re-encountered him, but we did a lot of running in the rain and the snow, and burning off excess energy that way. And then I found this sleeping pill. It was called Placidil. It's not on the market anymore, thankfully, but I hadn't slept for several weeks, and when Carol Durant was kidnapped and Deborah Kent disappeared, and Carol Durant gave a description of him in his car, and I knew that my bad guy was her bad guy, and the handcuff key that was used in the attack on Carol Durant was found in the parking lot where Deborah Kent disappeared from. And I felt that it was my fault. Had I gone to the police earlier or done something, maybe these other women wouldn't be getting kidnapped and disappearing, and bodies wouldn't be being found in canyons. And I had a whole bunch of guilt, and I was totally unable to sleep. And I acquired this bottle of sleeping pills. And I thought, I'm a pharmacy student, and I know that just one pill is not going to kill me, and I didn't want to die. I just wanted to close off the emotions for a little bit and maybe go to sleep. And so I tried one pill on a weekend when my roommates weren't home. And what happened, I expected to just gradually start feeling drowsy. But what happened was that all of that pain and anxiety and fear and horribleness that I was feeling just drifted away. It was like a euphoric moment, and I felt better than I had felt for the month since it had happened, and I wanted to stay feeling like that all the time. So I started taking Placidil more often and more often. And at first I was hiding it from my roommates, but then they noticed what was happening. And the religious leader of our church came and talked to me and things, and wanted to know if I was suicidal or what I was feeling. And of course I couldn't tell them why I was acting stupid. I just reassured them that I wasn't suicidal and I'm fine, and I just try a couple sleeping pills because I'm tired. And they kind of believed me, because the other story was more unbelievable, I think. So I managed to graduate college, and I got a good job in my career. I was a pharmacist. Had a good paycheck coming in. I met a wonderful man, married him, raised kids, have 2 daughters. They're grown now. I was active in my community, in my pharmacy career, and active in my church. Went to Disneyland with the kids, did all the things parents are supposed to do, and I shoved all those feelings and emotions about Ted Bundy so far down inside that I thought they were gone. Of course, they weren't gone. I hadn't really dealt with them. I just had shoved them down. And one day, like 37 years later, I was at work at the pharmacy job, and we had a new manager that decided he was going to yell at me. And so he called me to the office, and he says, "I have proof, absolute proof, video evidence of you committing a very serious company policy violation." And I'm going through my mind thinking, what did I do? I don't do Placidil anymore. I haven't done for years. And I'm not a stealer, and I try hard. I don't think I misfilled the prescription. I don't know what he could be thinking of that I did. That was a fireable offense. And he handed me a picture from the security camera that showed a girl holding something in her hand. And he says, "You see her? That's the technician that I just fired." Because he fired the other pharmacist and another pharmacist and the technician, and he was thinking about firing me. And he says, "This is the technician that I just fired. And look what she's got in her hand." And I didn't know what it was. Could have been a pencil, or, the picture was fuzzy and grainy. But something long and skinny she had in her hand. And he said, "That is a piece of red licorice. And look at this. This is you in this next picture, and you are standing right by her. You're the pharmacist on duty who is letting her eat candy in the pharmacy, and that's against company policy." And I thought, whoa, all the pharmacists don't get breaks, so they can eat in the pharmacy, and it just seems wrong to have M&Ms or potato chips or something and not share them with the technicians who are working right by you. And every pharmacy I've ever worked in, my whole entire 40-year career, everyone has just eaten responsibly in the pharmacy. And it's never been a big deal, and I'm not the only one who allowed people to do that. So I'm feeling picked on and sorted out, and that he's yelling at me when he shouldn't be yelling at me. Why is he singling me out for punishment when everybody else is eating candy in the pharmacy? And I wasn't even eating the candy. It was somebody else. I'm going to get fired for somebody else eating a piece of licorice in the pharmacy. And then I went and I talked to my pharmacy manager, and I told him that I didn't think that was fair that he yelled at me. He didn't fire me, he just put me kind of on probation. And my pharmacy manager said, "We're good friends. Let me just talk to the manager. I'll talk to the boss and tell him that it wasn't a out and out purposeful violation of policy, that you were just doing what everybody else does." So he did, and when he came back, he says, I talked to him, and he says he'd really like to talk to you later today. And so I went on my lunch break, and I took my film to the car where I could have a private conversation with the boss, and I called him up, and he said to me, "Rhonda, you don't have the right to tell people that I'm treating you unfairly, and you don't have the right to cry and whine at me. You should be thankful that you're even still employed by this company. I could fire you anytime I want." And those words just were so familiar to me, and the same voice inflection and everything that Ted Bundy had used all those years ago when I was on the canyon floor crying and begging for my life, that all those stored up feelings just burst through. And I found myself in a really serious PTSD place, with nightmares and flashbacks and panic attacks and noise in my ears, and just whatever symptom of PTSD you can think of, I had. And that's when my family noticed that I was angry. I had a lot of anger that had been there for all those years too, and they said, you need to take a pill or see a doctor. And so I secretly went and found a psychologist and started talking to him and working through the PTSD symptoms. And that's how the book came about. I didn't really intend to write a book. I just wrote it as a way of expressing it. I thought if it's hard to talk about it, if I write it down, then maybe I can write it down and read it back 3 times, and then I will feel better because I've expressed it, and then I can burn the little notebook and put it back where it was for all those years, and my life will go on again nice. And that journaling turned into the book, because at that point I had realized, through therapy and so forth, that it wasn't my fault that all those women died. That Carol DeBrunch told about him, gave a description, and that didn't keep him from killing people. And if I'd come forward, he might have sold his Volkswagen, he might have moved to Ohio or somewhere, but he would not have stopped killing, because he was not a stopper, he was a killer. So I have been able to put that pretty much behind me now with some skills and some ways of staying in the present and dealing with the panic attacks when they start coming on and things, and the nightmares have pretty much gone away, and I'm pretty much back to my old self. I've got a little business on the side. I've retired from pharmacy now, so I don't have to deal with crazy bosses. And I'm doing good now. My kids are grown, I have grandkids, have pets. Life is good. The next question is, how difficult was it to change from being a victim to being a survivor? I don't consider myself a victim of Ted Bundy. I think I was for a while. And then each time, kind of, as I was working on healing through this, and I would stop the Placidil, and I would start making friends and start going on dates and start living my life, then something would happen, like he would escape from Colorado jail, and that would just tip me upside down again, and then I would just start getting my life back again, and he escaped again, and then I just get my life back again, and he's murdered people in Florida, and it seemed like there's just always one upset after another upset. But through therapy and through just people being nice to me, and through the positive responses to my book and stuff, I have figured out that it wasn't my fault. It's never the victim's fault. I didn't have anything to be ashamed of, and then the shame and the guilt can just go away. What's the question again? Let's see. Victim to a survivor. By sharing my story was the hardest thing. I didn't even share it with my family or anybody until after I'd shared it with a psychologist 37 years later. Not a single soul on the whole planet knew this had happened to me. And after the boss yelled at me and it all came flooding back, that's when I think I was a victim. And going through therapy and realizing it wasn't my fault, and that I didn't need to feel shame or embarrassment or worthlessness or filthy or any of those things, and that by sharing my story I can help other women. I've learned that as many as 85 to 90% of people who are victims of violence don't tell. They keep it all bottled up inside, and keeping things bottled up is what causes PTSD, the bad symptoms, flashbacks and panic attacks and things. And I think that maybe my story can be inspirational to other women who are keeping these deep, dark secrets, and encourage them to find a way of beginning their healing process and finding somebody to talk to about it. And if I had a message to tell other just women, if somebody comes to you and chooses you to be their go-to person, the one that they have chosen out of the whole world to confide in, to first of all believe them, and second of all don't be judgmental. It doesn't matter what kind of clothes they were wearing or what time of the night it was, or if they had been to a party and were drinking. It doesn't matter, because it's never the victim's fault. And I think that my story and other survivors' stories will help women who are carrying deep, dark secrets and feeling guilt and shame to be able to start healing their deep down wounds. And then the next one is, when you found out that Ted Bundy had murdered so many girls, how can you be a survivor of that murderer? I don't really understand that question. Another question is, how do I feel about this event today? Today I feel still a little bit embarrassed about it. It's probably because by going public with it, I put myself in a position where people are wanting me to talk about it and inviting me to do things like this video and so forth. And because I'm a very shy, quiet person, these things put me completely out of my comfort zone. But I will say that this event with Ted Bundy is one of those things in life that I wish had never happened. Another question is, many girls are sexually assaulted today. Do I have any advice for them? If your life is in danger, there's no correct way of escaping. Some people say scream and yell and make a big fuss and fight back and do whatever you can to survive, call attention to yourself. Some people say just be quiet and cooperative and hope for the best outcome, the least amount of physical injury. There's really no right or wrong answer to this. I just say kind of listen to your inner secret soul and what they're telling you, and do whatever you think you need to do to survive. And then I think find somebody to tell it to. Not especially because you need to catch the perpetrator or put them in jail, although that would be probably a really good thing, but in order so you prevent yourself from getting PTSD later down the road. Police and firemen and first responders is a requirement of their job now that they have professional counseling after they go to a really traumatic incident. After school shootings and things, there are crews of psychologists rush to that area trying to talk to as many victims and survivors and witnesses as they can so that everybody has a chance to express their feelings and not hold them in, and hopefully they'll cut down the number of PTSD cases somewhere farther down the road. And I would encourage these young people who are being victimized to start their healing process, and hopefully a little earlier than 37 years later. If Ted was alive today, what would I say to him? I'd probably ask him why. Why? That's just why. Why would you kill people, and why did you choose the people that you chose, and why even would you? What would drive you to do that? And what, if anything, could anybody have done at some point earlier in your life to stop you that would have prevented you from starting this murderous career? Other than that, I don't think I would want to talk to him. Have I seen movies and documentaries that are out recently, and what do I think of them? Have I seen them? I have seen them. I've seen all of them. I think they're important. Young people today, some of them don't even know who Ted Bundy is. When I was getting ready for my book to come out, I was talking to one of my pharmacy interns, and I said to him, so do you know who Ted Bundy is? And he said, did he play football? No, he didn't play football. People people are forgetting, and not especially that they should remember Ted Bundy, but they should remember what he did and be prepared to not let that ever happen again. Whatever we can do to stop people like him from doing things like he did would be a really good plan. My thoughts about the live TV trial. I watched the entire TV trial. Part of it was fascinating, very interesting and educational, because I've never been to a murder trial before, and it kind of let you into the courtroom to learn how trials and things work and function. Part of it was disgusting, the way that Ted Bundy was dressed like a lawyer and not like a prisoner, and acting as his own lawyer, and flirting with the people, the women in the audience, and how he managed to get himself married. Totally disgusting that he could kind of put on a show and make it all about him and not about the victims. And part of the reason that I watched all of it was to make sure he stayed there and wasn't out and escaping again, because he did escape twice. I wanted to make sure he was there, so I watched and tuned in every day to make sure he is where he's supposed to be. Then they want to know the feelings, my feelings when he was executed. I thought that Ted Bundy should die, and I was glad that he was dead. I didn't feel any special vindication for myself. It was 15 years too late and not on my behalf. Most normally I would not condone the death penalty. I know that things can happen, things can go awry, whether it's anger or rage or jealousy or drugs or alcohol or whatever reason. Somebody ends up dead and somebody else goes to jail for murder. Most of those people are not murderers at heart, and they're not going to recommit. But Ted Bundy was not going to stop. The only way to stop him, he would kill, and then he would go to jail, and he would get out and kill again, and he would escape and kill again, and he needed to die. It's the only way to have stopped him. That's how I feel about that. Do I think that my resilience has been an inspiration to other people? Yes, I do. I've had so many really nice responses and emails from people who have survived traumatic things and are thanking me for sharing my stories, telling me that by doing so, it's helped them to have the strength to start facing their demons and starting their own healing processes. And that makes me feel really good that I've been able to help people. I hope that you guys can take something from my message. Don't forget, the book is available at Amazon. I Survived Ted Bundy, The Attack, Escape, and PTSD That Changed My Life. It'll have a lot more information and details than I've left here. Bye.